a deep discussion about DeepSeek. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by MacVoices Live, our weekly live panel discussion of what is going on in the Apple space, as well as the larger tech world, and how it is impacting you. Join us live at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, or whatever time that is wherever you are, at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV, and participate in the chat, or catch the edited and segmented versions of the show on the regular MacVoices channels and feeds. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's MacVoices Live. It's Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We are on YouTube at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV, and in the chat room. We'd love to have you join us in the chat room so you can comment on what we're commenting on, or just comment on things that have nothing to do with anything, like several people are already, which seems to be a common occurrence. Number of things, as always, to get to tonight, so we'll just get going. So I'm going to take the screen as I have it, to my top right, to my top left. To my top left, I rearranged the screen, I shrunk it, and everything's jostled. David Ginsburg. David, good to see you.
Good to see you. Glad to be here. Some good conversation tonight. Always looking forward to this week. It's always my favorite time of the week.
Yeah, my favorite time too. And you have a show of your own. I'm glad this is your favorite time.
Well, one of the favorites.
Okay. All right. There you go. There you go. Brian Flanigan-Arthurs is back. We missed you last week, but you had business to attend to. And I got in trouble with Brian earlier because I mentioned a certain basketball team that apparently he doesn't like to talk about. So I'm sorry, Brian.
Oh, all is forgiven. It's okay. Great to be back. Thank you.
All right. I won't take it any farther than that. I'll just say good evening to Marty Jencius. Marty, it's good to have you.
Hi, Chuck. I've got this new toy, this ring that does all your health metrics on it. And I got a notice this morning that I was under duress. Somehow it knew that. And then I needed to take the day and make it an easy day and kind of recuperate. And so I decided to make, from scratch, chicken vegetable soup. And it really was relaxing, except for the part where I had to debone the chicken. And the chicken really didn't care that much for it. But after the first leg came off, not a lot of complaints. Turned out to be very tasty soup. Had a lot of blood to clean up in the kitchen, but it's been a pretty good day, and I'm feeling great.
He's got the hand palm already.
I showed up at exactly the right time.
Oh my God! Yes, you did.
I know. Eric's doing like a triple face palm here on that one. Oh.
But Marty, isn't it crazy how loud those chickens will get when you try and debone them like that?
Right?
Yeah.
Louder than my dog barking.
Right? It's surprising. You wouldn't think they could project so much volume out of such a tiny little mouth.
Yeah.
Eric Bolden, I'm sorry to have to ask you to be introduced following that, but that's just the luck of the draw.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm all good. I'm all good.
Glad to have you. What do we have?
I'm glad to be here. It was so warm today. It's like in the 40s. Perfect swimming weather. So I thought I'd have, the Wisconsin River. In theory, on the shoreline, there's like 5 or 6 bald eagles, and there's some ducks over here. You can't see any of that, so just take my word for it.
We trust you.
Okay.
It's like AI. I'm sure it's right.
Boy, this is a hot group tonight. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of hot, Webb Bixby is here. Webb, it's good to see you, and congratulations on your team's win.
What is it? 7 AFC championships in a row, and trying to go for 3 straight Super Bowls. I'll be humble. It's going to be tough. You can't take it for granted, but the ride sure has been fun. So good to be here, Chuck. And we got the football talk out of the way right now. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. You're quite welcome. But we'll do more somewhere along the line. Jim Ray is here, just looking terribly excited at the Kansas City Chiefs wins. Aren't you, Jim?
What sport is this?
You stole Gamet's line, you know that?
Full contact golf.
Good to see you, Jim. Glad you made it. Mark Fuccio is here. Mark, because we missed you last week, you're back with another one of your interesting trademark chart backgrounds. So explain for everyone what you were talking a little bit about in the pre-show.
Okay, so at the end of last week, a Chinese company called DeepSeek introduced their own LLM, and they made some serious claims about how they were able to train it, with much more basic chips and much less power, and it caused ruckus. And yesterday there was a rout, over $1 trillion of market cap erased from all sorts of growth companies. So that's an area I've been watching and investing in and getting in and getting out of for about the past 18 months. And it struck me that is this a shot in the bow? Because not all growth waves go on forever, and then they change. And it reminded me of a quote by a famous investor and publisher and author named William J. Bill O'Neill, who in his career he basically grew up as a poor boy in the Midwest in the Depression and ended up worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So he learned how to trade in the market, and he focused on a lot of growth stocks, and he sort of distilled 40 or 50 years of wisdom down into an observation that, when growth stocks hit their top, and the market loses interest and they're going to go elsewhere, he had his so-called 70-30 rule that there's a 70% chance they'll go down 30%, which is what happened yesterday with many, many, many stocks. And that's why they were in the mid-20s or so percent, but close. That reminded me of this quote or observation of his, that there's a 70% chance they'll go down 30% and a 30% chance they'll go down 70%. So who knows what's going to happen? And, we should have an interesting discussion about, DeepSeek. So that's the meaning of the chart behind me. I want to say something to Webb. We were exchanging some messages on Sunday as the Chiefs were playing, and I was in a room, with about maybe 30, maybe 36 other people, enjoying adult beverages and things, and there are only two of us that were were Chiefs fans. A lot of the people, they were upset that the 49ers mediocre performance this year, and they're upset that the Chiefs beat them, so I think we came out barely alive, and I'm wondering if I can send Webb a bill for security services.
No.
Simple, clear answer. Perfect. I love it.
I got to get my own.
That was very definitive, Webb. Thank you. Well, speaking of no, Jeff Gamet is here. Jeff, I'm glad you made it out of traffic.
Me too, and I'm so happy to get to be here tonight with Chuck's Underpants Brigade.
We did you proud.
A treat. Thank you.
Yeah, they held up your end, so to speak. Yeah.
As one does. I have a diagram for that. Do you want me to show it to you, Chuck?
Or an hypothesis.
Yeah, hold up your end, Chuck.
Thanks. Yeah. Oh, man.
Stick figures.
Every week I think it's going to be boring, and every week it's just is not at all.
Yeah, but I have to say, I was having so much fun when I was hanging out at the sports bar, having sports talk with all my sports friends when the game was happening, and everyone was so excited because the people in the bright colored costumes were doing the really cool things, and the people in the crappy costumes, they just weren't. And go team. How did I do? Did I sound like I fit in?
No. To quote
Oh.
Webb, no.
No.
But I tried.
Oh. Well, Mark sort of did the introduction to the first couple articles I wanted to bring to everyone's attention because it feels like we have to talk a little bit about DeepSeek. And if you haven't paid attention to this yet, Mark gave a really good introduction. I'm throwing the articles in now because they all sort of go together. Let's see, there's one, there's two. Whoops, I threw that in the wrong spot. Try that again. And there comes number 3. I've got a lot of questions, and I don't know how you all feel about this, but this struck me. I mean, I know DeepSeek has been around for a little while, or at least it's been known about for a few weeks, but it seemed to really hit things this past Sunday because the articles were everywhere. The news was everywhere. As Mark said, the stock market took a serious beating, especially the tech stocks, and especially the AI tech stocks. And I'm intrigued because I've heard a little bit of commentary, but not a lot. There are a lot of claims being made by DeepSeek, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of backup information or backup confirmation that I can find. One of the big things, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but they claim that they were able to train their AI on something like $5.6 million worth of training, and as opposed to 50, 70, 100 million, which is what some of the larger AI companies have been allegedly claiming that they required to do it. The other thing that sorry, Mark.
Oh, I'm just mumbling to myself. You're missing a 0.
I'm missing a 0. Okay.
Yes.
But the other thing, though, that I think is really intriguing is that several reports are out there that the accuracy is questionable and seems to be being audited by China, notably queries made about Taiwan. And so I'm looking at this and thinking, were we in an AI bubble? I mean, and did it get pricked and everything went boom? Or is this a real thing, or is the truth somewhere in between? I don't know. I've just got a lot of questions that I don't seem to have. I can't. So far, I haven't found any answers. Marty, can you clarify anything for me?
Well, Mark mentioned the fact that they were able to run it. NVIDIA was saying that really most of the AI platforms are run on NVIDIA chips and a particular NVIDIA chip. So everybody had kind of bought into that process, and they put together their system, their model that ran just as efficiently or as effectively on a less than NVIDIA chip. It was a lower grade NVIDIA chip, but they were trying to say you don't need this one particular chip to run it. So that was kind of the first shockwave, and Mark alluded to that because all of the current models were kind of tied into that process. I've been trying to follow as much as I can on Reddit on it, and Reddit is not necessarily a perfect source of information, but there have been some things on Reddit that say there are concerns about, they're going to train their model like anybody else is going to train their model. The difference is we had these same concerns with TikTok, that anything that you have might be could become part of information or data for the Chinese government. And then there are other claims saying stop being, sky is falling on this, that the claims are kind of over around the Chinese government involvement, or the potential are just people who are too worried about it, and it happens on all systems, that they're going to use the information they have to train on it. I think it's a plus for Apple. I know you have an article on that, but I think they can't do it on a closed system yet. The other piece that I saw this morning was they put together a model that would also do images, and the image representation was much better than what DALL-E 3 could do at this point in terms of generating images. And it's got to be light years ahead of Playground. But I haven't seen that model. I haven't seen it out in the wild yet. And then they said, and somebody commented, wait till they do it with video. That's probably coming next. So it's an interesting time. I think of it in terms of, we were worried about China coming over and purchasing a bunch of land. I think they found a better way to shake up the American economy and shake up American way of thinking around technology, given the recent TikTok issue and given this current issue with DeepSeek. Just think if Microsoft did this. Like, imagine they gave away Teams for free. That could just blow the whole economy. Well, they do give away Teams for free, and it hasn't had an impact whatsoever.
Oh, I disagree with that, Marty, but it's an impact in the wrong direction. But we'll get to that another time.
Yeah.
Let's see. Jeff.
All right. So the tipping point, I think, for this, when it became the mainstream, everyone has to talk about it, and the stock market's going to freak out, was when downloads really took off. And I do find it interesting that the metric used for downloads is Apple's App Store. And regardless of whether or not that's an accurate representation of overall downloads, it's still interesting. That's where the media went first to see how many people are downloading this. Then, as far as the whole thing, like you brought up, the Taiwan information, of course, this model running in China based on data that they could use to train in China is not going to give us the same information about Tiananmen and Taiwan that we get with models trained outside of China. So the results that we're seeing there, I am not surprised in the slightest. I'm also not concerned, because what we're seeing here is not about, did China just leapfrog all of the LLM models that have been growing in the United States. It's about a new way of doing this whole thing has been introduced, and it's open source. So anyone can go in and audit the code, set up their own systems, spin up their servers, start training, and run with this. So that, to me, is the bigger thing here. And then for the tech market here in the United States, the salt in the wound, I think, is that this exposes the hubris of the tech bro culture that has felt that or at least projected that the only way to move forward with this type of technology is the way they're doing it, with more and more hardware and more power, and it just has to be more all the time. And here comes this system where it's like, hey, we didn't have to use as much stuff as you did, and we don't even have legally access to the same chips that you can use, and we still made something that's performing this well. Boom. So yeah, this should be a wake-up call for our AI tech bros in the United States, it's time to rethink how they're going about what they're doing and start working on efficiency.
Okay. So Brittany Smith couldn't be with us tonight. She's been otherwise occupied with good reason, but she's in the chat tonight. So first of all, hello, Brittany. Second, if you're not following Brittany on LinkedIn, you really should, because she's producing some great videos about productivity and efficiency and a number of other things. So do that. So Britt, there's a little plug for you. But her comment is, and Jeff's part of this you just made, it's good for Apple to use with Chinese customers, but if you haven't heard how it talks about Taiwan, it's maybe not the best one for us to actually use. The tech angle is interesting though. And yeah, it's, Jeff, what you said about training makes absolute perfect sense. But you have to wonder, what else it might slant.
Well, I wonder the same thing about the models that we have access to in the United States.
Yeah, fair point.
I guess what I'm saying is I trust none of the models. They might give me some information at some point that could be useful while I continue my research or investigation into whatever I'm doing, but I do not feel comfortable taking anything that any of these models tell me at face value.
Well, that's a good rule for pretty much anything. Mark.
Okay, so I've paid a lot of attention to this, trying to figure out as much as I can, and it seems that what their innovation is that instead of starting from a blank slate and then trying to boil the ocean with hundreds of thousands of GPUs, that they use as a starting point open source models from people like Meta and Tencent and other companies. It also seems that their innovation was how they were setting about training them, and I don't want to go down a rat hole about that, but that seems like valuable innovation. So to Jeff's point about sort of the battle of manhood of 500,000, 100,000, 300,000 GPUs and training centers, they took a completely different approach. Now I'm very skeptical. They said I couldn't find any specific information about what sort of hardware they actually used for training, but I know that there are a number of, there are many data centers or ISPs around the world that are standing up data centers for AI computation. And last August, just after the NVIDIA earnings report, there was discussion about, well, okay, yes, NVIDIA could still sell them some, but they had to dial back performance by certain amounts. A week or two after that, there was a news story that surfaced that China was using a dedicated ISP in, I believe it was New Zealand, but it may have been Australia, and that they were using that for training. And that at the time that seemed even better. They don't have to screw around, trying to build buildings and install racks and cooling and redundant power supplies or anything. They outsource that to somebody else, and they can just access over network and do their training. So I think that leads into sort of the second point. Chuck mentioned that they said they spent $5.6 million on training, but that's not defined. What does that mean? Was that just coffee for the staff, for their engineers? Was that electricity for, some of the racks or all of the racks at the data center? It's tremendously misleading. It's fun with numbers out explaining what the numbers are. So I'm willing to accept that they found a way that they can do it with dramatically less training, but there isn't enough information there to think that it's anything, than a brown number, which is pulled out of where you sit down. So I think from technology, I think they have some, some interesting advances. And I think really the key message is that a lot of the open source models from Meta and other companies do a really good job. And, that's great, and it should be great for us and the economy and the entire world and planet that these tools can be done for and trained or built for a lot less. I think the other point I think that a lot of the press is sort of just gotten confused about is there's two phases. One is there's a training phase that consumes an enormous amount of power for a finite amount of time, and then there's sort of long tail incremental power requirements for when Jeff or Chuck or Marty do a query. That does not take as much energy per se to respond to that query, but cumulatively with hundreds of millions or billions of people on the planet, that can consume a lot more energy. And there's been a lot of other innovation and talk about specialized chips that companies like Amazon, Google, Apple are doing to sort of bring that down. And I think that's probably more about trying to avoid the NVIDIA tax and not supporting their 65, 68 percent gross margins for things for training. So there's a lot of unanswered questions here. I'd be interested in seeing in the next couple weeks, couple months, if other AI companies adopt their innovation and how they train these models. It's sort of about scientific method, right? You publish your results, and can it be reproduced or not? So sort of last thing is it seems to me there's a little bit about global competitiveness here. Our new president and administration Wednesday last week, had a big deal talking about they're going to spend $500 billion for AI data centers, and then Musk came out the next day and said, "Well, can they do that? They really don't have that much money." And then, oh well, it's going to be $100 billion to start, and then it's going to be $500 billion in the fullness of time. So, that's a battle about male organ length. And I could imagine Chairman Xi Jinping, wondering, okay, how can I, throw a wrench at Trump and the Americans? And they did this thing, and I think the biggest thing, that has been, I don't think it takes enough attention is, they've priced, their usage, at about the 10th the price of, companies like Anthropic or OpenAI. So it seems like that's sort of a little bit of a trade war. I haven't used the tool yet. I tried to, sign in for an account yesterday morning, but there was server overload and said come back later. Well, I went on and I never came back later. But I think this is very interesting, very important development, and it's potentially good news for everybody on the planet.
I'm anxious to see somebody, sort of to Jeff's point, since this is open source and they can take it and train it, and I've got to believe that some of the larger companies already have. But interestingly, I think the most definitive comment I've heard was that it's an interesting model. Now, is that because it is really that good and they don't want to talk it up, or is it really that good? And I don't know. I question all of it.
Well, Chuck, this is an interesting model. Could also mean, that's a really innovative way they went about doing this thing.
Yes.
And we don't know yet.
Right. That's it. Jeff, there's so much we don't know, yet everybody seems to be taking so much of it on faith, on the word of the developers and the Chinese government. And yes, this dropped into the echo chamber and it's been reverberating. But I'm curious here because there's one other thing I feel like I almost have to bring up, and that's with the TikTok situation. All the queries are being sent to Chinese servers. So is anybody concerned about this? Should we be? I kind of think we should be. If we're worried about TikTok at all, we definitely should be worried about this.
Well, I think that's a concern that develops in the fullness of time. I think initially, all the traders and algos were peeing their pants and selling every AI I mean, there's been so much run up on the companies having anything to do with AI, from NVIDIA to people who make the servers and power and storage, and electric companies that have plants in areas where data centers are being built. So everything just suddenly, oh my God, is this over? So typical Wall Street, sell first, ask questions and figure out later. So we will figure this out. And your point about the queries and people worrying about, that's not just related to to DeepSeek. That's related to any other LLM model that people use. So, I think that's the overarching issue is, you're sending that stuff out and that's potentially leaking, proprietary information.
Agreed, 100%, Mark. And that's one reason that when I talk to attorneys about this, they say you have to be careful. In fact, if they had their way, you wouldn't be sending anything because there's no clear disclosure of exactly where you're sending it to do all this processing, whether it's going to somewhere in the U.S. or somewhere in a country that is not friendly to the U.S. But I am curious with this group, because this is a pretty tech savvy. Mark, you just said you couldn't get in. Who else has downloaded it? Has anybody downloaded it? And if you have you played with it?
I downloaded it, haven't played with it. I don't do a lot of LLM stuff on my phone, and it's a phone app right now. When I use ChatGPT, for example, it's on my desktop. That's where I'm spending most of my time working. So I haven't played with it yet. I'm attempting to just get back into the service, and I'm having some trouble getting back into the service. But that just might be how overcrowded it is right now.
Maybe you should hop on Redbook. Ask someone if they know how to get in.
Yeah, so I tried to get it on my phone, and I clicked the button to see about their privacy policies or data collect. Both of them hit 404s. So that's why I decided, So a couple hours late, well, actually, 90 minutes later, I tried to do it from my Mac, and I was able to get the policies, and they didn't seem any overly aggressive compared to other sites, but it clearly. To Chuck's point about queries and prompts and things, they would save it, they would record it, they would use it for, any purpose necessary to improve their service. So that coupled with the fact I couldn't get in, I should try it later tonight or tomorrow.
I just the whole thing is really interesting to me. If it depends on how paranoid I want to sound on a live show, but queries seem to be one of the big things, one of the secret sauces to get things out of different LLMs. And if that's the case, is this a way for China? Because I'm making certain assumptions that there's some state backing going on here. But is that for a way for China to capture some of these? Because if this query worked good on Claude, maybe it'll work great on DeepSeek or better on DeepSeek. To Marty's comment about the imaging, there's so many different implications here that I just hope that everyone slows down a little bit in every respect and is careful. To pull this back to Apple, though, a little bit, 9 to 5 Mac had an article that said that Apple was benefiting in 3 different ways from this. Number one was it helped reclaim the world's most valuable company. The second one was the power of the App Store charts. Apparently, this DeepSeek went right to number 1 on the App Store charts, and that seemed to feed the frenzy a little bit, at least to 9 to 5 Mac's way of thinking. And the third is something that is, I think, especially interesting given what happened to Apple last week and what has happened in the last 2 days here, yesterday and today, where Apple took a real beating, the stock. And then yesterday and today, it started to come back to a lot closer to where it had been. And they seem to think that it's avoiding AI competitors' woes. So that some of the things that seem to be hurting Apple last week are suddenly, helping Apple now, which just shows you how fickle the whole thing is. So, Jeff, commentary?
I'll just drop it out as a statement. You mentioned that you do have concern about what the Chinese government might be doing if they're intercepting queries that people are making through DeepSeek or potentially any other LLM. And so here's my comment. It's okay to be concerned and paranoid about what LLMs and the companies behind them may or may not be collecting, but be paranoid of that independent of which government may or may not be in control of the land where those servers are housed. That just be cautious and aware in general. It doesn't matter where that server lives and what government may or may not have access to.
Jeff, clarify that for me a little bit. So
be
you're
paranoid of all of them.
okay.
I don't care what
yeah.
country it's in. Be paranoid of what's being collected through all of them. And what's happening with DeepSeek is probably no different than what's happening with any other LLM in any other country.
So are you suggesting that the server location is as important a consideration as the organization backing the LLM?
No.
Excuse me.
No, what I'm saying is be paranoid in general, not because of one specific country.
Okay. Mark, I'll give you the last word before we move on.
Oh yeah, I was responding to the comment about Apple, which is that sort of last year the commentary was, oh, Apple's so smart, they're just running the apps and they don't have to invest $100 billion a year of capex. And then by year end, the press, they were tired of that. The new bright shiny object was Apple's behind, because they're not investing hundreds of $billions in capex. And now they're moving ahead and realizing, Apple can get the benefit because they have device in hundreds of millions of people around the globe. That's a toll road. That's an access point. And they can partner like they're doing with ChatGPT. And I'm finding, because I have an iPhone 16, I can ask query and it says, oh, would you like me to go to ChatGPT for that? And I say yes. And and about 75-80% of the time it's useful. And then the remainder of the time it's just complete and utter nonsense. But that's typical of using ChatGPT or any of the other LLMs. So back to you, Chuck.
Stay tuned. We'll be talking about this more, I feel sure, as more information comes out, good or bad, or just interesting. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.